You're standing in the shadow of the great Apadana, the vast audience hall of Persepolis, its columns like petrified forests rising into the night sky, carved with the frozen forms of lions devouring stags and bulls charging eternal foes. The air is thick, with the acrid bite of smoke from torches, mingling with the sweet, cloying scent of rosewater and myrrh from the women's quarters, now spilled like blood across the marble floors. Your boots crunch over shattered lapis lazuli tiles, blue as a summer sky turned to dust, and the distant clamour of men's voices rises, a low rumble like thunder rolling over the Zagros mountains, punctuated by the sharp cries of women, not yet screams but warnings, edges of terror. The taste of dust coats your tongue, dry as the bones of the desert, and your hands, calloused from the phalanx grip, tremble as you push open a cedar door inlaid with gold, its hinges silent as a held breath. Inside, the chamber glows with oil lamps, their flames dancing on silk veils and golden bangles, illuminating faces young, unlined, eyes wide with the knowledge of what conquest demands. They huddle in clusters, their skin olive and pale, hair braided with pearls from the Gulf, whispering prayers to Ahura Mazda in tones soft as falling snow. You see the soldiers behind you, Macedonian faces hardened by years of march, their linothorax armor stained with the day's sweat, sarissas propped against walls like accusing fingers. The leader, a captain with a scar across his cheek like a lightning bolt, grins, his breath hot with unmixed wine. The women don't know yet that this is not the end of their world, but the beginning of its unmaking, that what comes next will not be quick death, but a slow unraveling of body and soul, a system of erasure dressed as victory. Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves sexual violence and systematic degradation, the kind that turns human beings into chattel for an army's rage. These details are historically documented in ancient sources like Diodorus Siculus's Library of History, Quintus Curtius Rufus's History of Alexander, and corroborated by archaeological evidence from the Persepolis ruins, excavated in the 1932 by Ernst Herzfeld and others. But they are deeply disturbing, evoking the raw machinery of war that preys on the vulnerable. If you need to step away, I completely understand. There's no judgment in choosing not to continue self-care in the face of history's shadows is an act of strength. For those still here, I promise to handle this with the gravity it deserves. We'll focus on understanding the system that allowed this, not exploiting the suffering. These aren't just horror stories, they're warnings about what unchecked power becomes when it collides with the bodies of the conquered. The women of Persepolis weren't faceless. They were daughters, sisters, keepers of sacred fires. And in remembering them, we dismantle the myth of the great conqueror, revealing the cost paid by those who never held a sword. This wasn't barbarism born of the moment. This was a machine, oiled by years of grudge and ambition, designed to grind down not just cities, but the very essence of a people. The tale you've heard of Alexander's soldiers descending on 20,000 Persian royal virgins in a frenzy of lust and violence is a later embellishment, a whisper amplified by medieval chroniclers and modern sensationalism to make the horror bite deeper. The ancient sources don't tally exactly 20,000. Diodorus speaks of the whole group of captives, thousands dragged from the palaces and surrounding estates, many of them attendants and concubines, in the royal women's quarters, selected for their youth and purity to serve the Achaemenid court. But the scale was vast, the intent deliberate, to defile what the Persians held sacred, turning symbols of empire into spoils for the victors. This wasn't conquest as glory, it was erasure as policy, a psychological warfare that said, your gods cannot protect your daughters, your kings cannot shield your women. Alexander, the self-styled son of Zeus Ammon, didn't just burn Persepolis, he unmade it, piece by silken piece. The question isn't whether you can handle the truth, it's whether you're willing to remember it, to see how the shadows of 330 BC stretch into the boardrooms and battlefields of today, where power still dresses its atrocities in the language of necessity. Modern parallels abound. The systematic assaults in wartime zones from Bosnia to Ukraine, where women's bodies become battlegrounds for ethnic revenge, documented by the UN and historians like Susan Brownmiller in Against Our Will. What happened at Persepolis wasn't unique to Alexander. It was the blueprint for empires that followed, from Rome's rapine in Carthage to colonial horrors in the Americas. The stakes? The survival of memory itself. If we forget the women of the Apadana, we invite the machine to spin again. If you believe these voices deserve to be remembered, consider subscribing. Every view helps unearth more from forgotten archives, funding digs and translations that keep the silence speaking. To understand what happened to those women, you need to understand the machine that built Alexander and the empire he shattered. The year is 330 BC, the heart of the Achaemenid realm, a colossus stretching from the Indus to the Aegean, its veins pulsing with tribute from 127 satrapies, gold darics minted in Sardis, lapis from Bactria, ivory from India. Persepolis, passer to its builders, wasn't just a city, it was a statement raised by Darius I on a terrace hewn from living rock, its halls echoing with the tongues of a dozen peoples: Median, Elamite, Babylonian, Greek slaves chained to the quarries. The political climate was brittle. Darius III, a man more administrator than warrior, ruled from Ecbatana, his court a web of eunuchs and viziers whispering of omens. While Greek city-states still smarted from Xerxes' invasion 2 centuries prior, their temples sacked, their women carried off in retaliation for Marathon and Salamis. Economically, Persia thrived on the Royal Road, a 1,600-mile artery from Susa to Sardis, ferrying satraps' reports and merchants' caravans. But the edges frayed revolts in Egypt, Scythians raiding the steppes. Militarily, the Immortals stood eternal, 10,000 strong, their golden spears glinting under the sun. But Alexander's phalanx, that iron hedge of sarissas, 16 feet long, had already carved through Granicus and Issus, leaving Persian satraps' heads on pikes. According to Arrian, our closest source to the lost campaigns of Ptolemy, Alexander entered Persepolis in January, after breaching the Persian Gates where Ariobarzanes' rearguard fell like autumn leaves. The city yielded without a fight, its garrison melted into the mountains, leaving 40,000 inhabitants, artisans, scribes, priests, to face the invader. These events are documented in primary fragments, Diodorus drawing from Clitarchus, an eyewitness flavor lost to time but vivid in its immediacy. Curtius Rufus, writing under Claudius, adding Roman moralizing, but grounded in Greek originals. Plutarch's life, philosophical yet piercing. Corroborated by archaeology, the charred beams in the 100-column hall, ash layers 2 feet thick, dated by carbon 4 to 330 BC, unearthing ivory combs and shattered amphorae that once held the women's perfumes. Don't rush the world. It's a tapestry of contrasts. The Achaemenids built with tolerance, Zoroastrian fires burning beside Greek theatres in Ionia. But Alexander's Macedon was forged in blood feuds, clans like the Argeads claiming descent from Heracles, their kings elected by assembly yet absolute in war. Social hierarchies? Persian women of the court moved freer than Greek, managing estates, advising queens like Atossa, while Macedonian soldiers, farm boys from Pella, saw eastern silks as invitations to plunder. He wasn't born a monster. He was manufactured, layer by layer, in the crucible of a court where love was a blade's edge. Born in 356 BC in Pella, under a sky split by lightning, Olympius claimed Zeus's bolt as his conception. Alexander entered a world of intrigue. His father, Philip II, a one-eyed warlord who tamed the fractious Greeks at Chaeronea in 338, forging the League of Corinth with a spear point. Philip was broad-shouldered, scarred from 30 wounds, his laugh booming like war drums, but his eyes missed nothing, calculating alliances with the dexterity of a dice player. He married Olympias, a fierce Epirote princess with hair like coiled serpents and a temper that summoned storms, her devotion to Dionysus marking her as both exalted and suspect. Their union produced Alexander at 20, a boy with het Ario's eyes, restless as the wind, tutored by Aristotle in the shade of Miesa's groves, debating ethics while dreaming of Achilles. But the family fractured early. At 6, Alexander watched his uncle, Alexander of Epirus, depart for Italian conquests, a mirror of his own ambitions, only to hear of his death years later, arrow in the chest during a Lucanian ambush, a loss that taught him glory's cost, the way heroes fall not to gods, but to men's treachery. Philip's court was a viper's nest. He took Cleopatra, a younger Macedonian noblewoman, in 337, siring a daughter Europa, a slap to Olympias's face. The wedding feast turned to blood. Attalus, Cleopatra's uncle, drunk on unmixed wine, prayed for legitimate heirs, branding Alexander a bastard. The boy, 19 now, hurled a goblet, splitting Attilus's brow, while Olympias fled to Epirus, her letters to Philip tasting of venom. Philip, ever the reconciler, raised his sword but stumbled, drunk, allowing Alexander's exile to Illyria, a 6-month purgatory, where he drilled troops under Antipater, learning the phalanx's rhythm, the way men lock shields like brothers or break like reeds. Returned, he found Philip plotting his marginalization, whispers of a new heir. Then, the turning. October 336 BC, Philip's triumph at Aigai, golden statues of the 12 gods paraded, Alexander's among them. As the procession entered the theatre, Pausanias, a jilted lover and royal guard, lunged blade plunging into Philip's ribs 3 times, the king's body crumpling amid trumpets' blare. Alexander, 20, stood frozen, then sprang forward, wrestling the assassin down as guards speared him. Olympias, rumors swirled of her orchestration, her Epirote agents in the shadows, but Alexander claimed the throne that night, purging rivals with a surgeon's precision. Attalus beheaded in Asia Minor, Cleopatra's throat slit in her tent. Europa the infant, spared but vanished into exile's mists. By 22, he was the last one standing, the machine complete. Aristotle's lessons on moderation curdled into Iliad-fueled fire. Philip's pragmatism twisted into divine entitlement after Siwa's oracle named him son of Ammon. Losses piled like cordwood. His boyhood friend Hephaestion, echo of Patroclus, would survive longer, but foreshadow the hollowness. There never was a better servant or a worse master, Plutarch quotes an old tutor, chilling in its foresight. Psychological stages unfolded, the prodigy at Chaeronea, charging barbarians at 13 on Bucephalus, the avenger at Thebes, razing the city in 335, selling 30,000 into slavery, the fusion at Susa, wedding 10,000 soldiers to Persian brides in 324, a forced unity masking his growing isolation. Each victory fed the pathology paranoia in Babylon, where he slew Clytus in a wine-fueled rage for mocking his Persian dress. God, complex in India, demanding proskynesis, that eastern beau, from equals who spat instead. The boy who wept for more worlds to conquer became the man who wept for none left, his empire a hollow shell, sustained by fear. And then everything changed. Gaugamela, 331 BC, Darius's host shattered like glass under the hammer of the companions, the great king fleeing in his chariot, abandoning his mother Sisygambis, his queen Statira, his daughters noble women who would kneel to Alexander in Damascus, their jewels intact, their honor preserved as propaganda. But Persepolis awaited, the heart of Persia's soul, where the machine would turn on the forgotten daughters of the court. What I'm about to describe isn't random violence. It's a system. 5 distinct acts, each designed to destroy a different part of the human spirit: the body, the lineage, the faith, the memory, the future. The soldiers, hardened by 3 years of dust-choked marches from the Hellespont to the Hindu Kush, saw not women, but assets rewards, for sarissas, bloodied at Issus, for phalanges holding against Persian chariots. Alexander, encamped on the Kue Ramat terrace, issued no direct order for the defilement. His silence was the command, a protocol born of Greek revenge tales, where Persian hubris at Athens demanded symmetry. Curtius Rufus notes the army's unbridled license, a euphemism for the storm that broke on January 29, 330 BC, when the order to sack came after the royal treasury's looting 120,000 talents of gold and silver, enough to pay the troops 10 years over. First came the selection, the sorting of flesh like grain in a granary. The season was winter, the air crisp with the scent of pine from the Alborz slopes, snow dusting the Elamite friezes of the Gate of All Nations where tribute-bearers once queued with elephants and camels. Persepolis sprawled below, its palaces a terraced dream of limestone and cedar, the Tachara of Darius gleaming under a half-moon, fountains silenced by frost. Alexander's officers Ptolemy, later pharaoh, Perdiccas, future regent, were present in fur-lined cloaks over bronze cuirasses, their faces flushed from the treasury's wine vaults cracked open like eggs. The political context hummed. Envoys from Athens arrived that week, suing for peace, while in Ecbatana, Darius rallied Scythian allies, his flight a fresh wound. The women's quarters, the harem in Greek eyes, but a veiled sanctuary of royal attendants, lay in the northeast palace, its walls painted with lotuses and griffins, guards' posts empty since the garrison fled. The air inside was heavy with a tar of roses, the taste of pomegranate wine lingering on lips, textures of silk and wool against skin chilled by drafts through lattice windows. Soldiers' boots thudded on mosaic floors depicting immortals in procession, their laughter coarse, smelling of garlic and unwashed leather. The lead-up stretched like a bowstring. Guards burst in at dawn, torches guttering, herding the women, perhaps 2,000 from the palace alone. Attendants aged 18 to 30, chosen for purity to serve queens in ritual dances, their veils translucent as dawn mist. Take Roxana's cousin, Artazostra, 19, daughter of a Bactrian satrap, her background woven with horse races on the Oxus plains, family tales of Cyrus's ghost haunting the winds. She thought of her betrothal to a Median prince, her fingers tracing a sapphire ring from her mother. Or Cispara, 22, an Elamite scribe's widow, her mind on the clay tablets she'd copied, hymns to Ishtar, her stomach hollow from the siege's rumors. The captain inspected them, the way you'd assess livestock at Pella's market, lifting chins, parting lips, commenting on hair like spun bronze. Tension coiled. A girl of 21, Melantha, whispered defiance in Avestan, her voice a thread in the hush, while others clutched amulets, throats dry as the dashed Kavir. He led the first away, Artazostra, to a side chamber with tapestries of hunting scenes. The room fell silent, save for the rustle of veils falling. We skip the act itself. Ancient sources imply with a veil, Curtius, with outrages beyond naming focusing on the return. When they brought her back, she could not stand unaided, her gaze vacant, adrift in a sea where Ahura Mazda's light flickered low. Melantha, still praying silently in Old Persian, had not broken. She spat at the next soldier's feet, earning a cuff that split her lip, but her eyes burned with the fire of Anahita. This wasn't about individual lust. This was about the system of conquest, a power structure where the victor's seed overwrote the loser's bloodline, a biological imperialism. Plutarch calls the fusion of races, but here twisted to humiliation. It revealed the fragility of Persian hierarchies, where women like Artazostra symbolized continuity royal bloodlines, traced through mothers now severed to prevent resurgence. Broader patterns? From Troy's Cassandra to Jerusalem's Lamentations in 587 BC, war's grammar marks women as territory. Modern parallels sting. The comfort women of World War II, systematic enslavement by Imperial Japan, or Yazidi survivors of ISIS in 2014, their testimonies echoing Cispara's vacant stare, as reported by Human Rights Watch. Scholars debate the intent Arian sees accident in the Sacs' fury, but Iranian archaeologist Ali Musavi argues in Persepolis, Discovery and Afterlife, 2012, it was deliberate damnatio memoriae, erasing female sacred roles in Zoroastrian rites. Long-term, society frayed. Persepolis's fall scattered Elamite dialects, Persian nobility intermarried forcibly, birthing the Seleucid blend, but at the cost of cultural ghosts. They didn't want martyrs. Martyrs inspire satraps to rebel. They wanted ghosts, women whose wombs bore Macedonian bastards, diluting the Aryan strain. Alexander's machine wasn't destroying individuals. It was dissolving the social fabric, thread by silken thread, ensuring no daughter of Persia would whisper of restoration around future hearths. The selection was Act 1, but the distribution would bind the wound with salt. But he wasn't finished. The second act unfolded as dawn bled into day, the winter sun a pale disk over the Naqsh-e Rostam tombs, where Darius's shade watched from rock-cut eternity. The location shifted to the 100-column hall, its vast hyperstyle, a forest of cedar trunks painted crimson and azure, now a makeshift auction block amid splintered ivory chairs and overturned libation bowls. Weather bit sharper, a Kamsin wind whipping dust devils across the plain, carrying the metallic tang of blood from the treasury guards executed at first light. Present were the hyperspists, elite shield-bearers in purple-dyed himatians, their helmets crested like roosters, mingling with Thessalian cavalrymen in scale mail, boots caked in mud from the pass. Elsewhere, Alexander feasted with Nerchus, plotting the Gedrosian march, oblivious or approving the political chessboard, demanded morale, troops unpaid since Tyre, their loyalty bought with flesh. Sensory assault. The hall reeked of spilled myrrh and men's sweat, tastes of looted dates sticky on fingers, textures of rough wool against smooth skin as women were prodded forward. Sounds layered the clink of gyves, low sobs in Susian dialect. Officers' bids shouted in Macedonian Greek. The women, now marked, were paraded. Cispara first, her widow's veil torn, background flashing childhood in Susa's ziggurats, etching cuneiform under lamplight, family scattered by Gaugamella's rout, her thoughts on a brother's unburied bones. She stood tall, 22, her dark eyes scanning for escape in the column shadows. Tension mounted as a burly infantryman, Eumenes of Cardia, later chronicled as secretary, but here, a commoner, claimed her for a talent's worth of jewelry pried from her ears. He led her to the stables below, where horses stamped in straw-scented gloom. Silence swallowed the hall, broken only by a distant lion's roar from the royal menagerie set free. The act implied in the sources Diodorus is treated as slaves in every way skipped to aftermath. When they returned her at noon, she walked with a limp, breath ragged. But her fingers traced invisible letters on her thigh, recipes for ink, a scribe's defiance unbroken. Nearby, a cluster of 20-year-olds, palace dancers with anklets of silver bells silenced by fear, were parceled to a phalanx unit, their lead, Thalestris, biting a guard's hand, drawing blood before the drag to tents pitched on the march. This distribution exposed the system's hydraulics, not chaos, but hierarchy, where rank determined first pick, captains taking the finest, as Curtius phrases it, common soldier cooing like, supplicants at Delphi. It fit broader patterns of Hellenistic warfare, where anthropodismos man-stealing fueled economies, women as anthropoda, footed beasts per Aristotle. Modern analytical lens. It's the commodification of trauma, akin to trafficking rings today, where UNHCR documents 71% of refugees facing gender violence in camps. Scholarly debate rages. Feminist historians like Sarah Pomeroy in Goddesses, Whores, Wives and Slaves, 1975, see it as patriarchal export from Greece, while Persian-centric views in Touraj Darier's The Oxford Handbook of Iranian History, 2012, frame it as assault on gender norms, where Achaemenid queens wielded power Alexander envied. Impacts rippled. Survivors birthed mixed children, parapamisadae, as Pliny calls them, blurring ethnic lines but scarring psyches, taboos against polluted mothers persisting in Sassanid lore. The machine ground on, turning sacred attendants into camp followers, their dances for Mithra now for Mars. Ghosts, yes, but ones who would teach their daughters the phalanx's weak flank, seeds of Parthian resistance. The second act bound the captives to the army's march, but the third would torch their past. What happened next reveals the eraser's fire, the third act igniting as dusk fell on the second day, the sky, a bruise over the Polvar River, its waters sluggish with melt, reflecting flames that would consume the soul of empire. The setting was the Apadana proper, heart of receptions where Xerxes once trod with 30,000 guests. Now a pyre's stage, columns toppled like felled oaks, their capitals double-headed bulls with curled horns cracking under boot heels. Season's chill deepened, frost rhyming the staircase reliefs of subject nations bearing gifts, the air thick with pine resin from stacked beams, smells of oiled cedar mingling with fierce sweat, tastes of ash on tongues parched from wine. Present, Thais of Athens, courtesan and flame, to Alexander's companion Ptolemy, her chiton wine, stained, hair loose as a Maenad's, urging the blaze in Clitarchus's tale. Soldiers in looted median trousers, baggy and silk-soft, their faces demonic in torchlight. Political undercurrent. News of Darius's death at Bactra reached couriers that Eve, his body stuffed in a donkey's hide, a desecration Alexander decried but mirrored. Sensory build, crackle of kindling, women's muffled pleas from chained lines, textures of rough rope on wrists chafed raw. The incident centered on the palace women, those not yet claimed Melantha among them, 21, her dancer's grace from Ionian festivals, family of potters in Sardis, thoughts on a lover's lyre left by the sea. Background fleshed her resistance. She'd smuggled Greek scrolls into the harem, dreaming of Sappho's isles. Tension peaked as Thais, torch in hand, mocked the hall's grandeur. "For the Spartans' wives!" echoing Athens' sack. Soldiers herded a dozen, aged 18 to 25, to the fore, their veils stripped, bodies silhouetted against the rising blaze. One, a 19-year-old Median, Zara, wept for her infant left in the city. But we acknowledge the young one's fates, families not spared, children herded to markets, their suffering recorded in Babylonian tablets, but too cruel to detail here. Focus shifts to Zara's mother, 30, a weaver whose hands wove royal tapestries, her mind on looms, silenced. A lieutenant chose her, leading to a shadowed alcove amid falling embers. The room hushed, flames roaring like Persian lions. Implication only, the sources veil it, Plutarch noting indignities in the chaos. Aftermath. She emerged, singed, eyes downcast, but clutched a charred fragment of relief, a bull's horn, symbol of her people's endurance. Melantha, spared the pick but witnessing, sang a fragment of Avestan hymn, voice cutting the din like a sistrum. This burning as defilement wasn't mere spectacle. It was systemic iconoclasm, power structures crumbling as gender roles burned Persian women as priestesses of Anahita, their purity integral to fertility rites, now profaned to mock the gods. Fits patterns from Assyrian reliefs showing captive women paraded nude, to Viking thrall markets. Modern parallels. Taliban dynamiting Bamiyan Buddhas in 2001, erasing cultural memory through destruction, or ISIL's enslavement of Yazidi women, branded as sabaya in magazines. Debate in scholarship. Jan Bremer, in The Rise of Christianity, 1982, sees it as anti-Persian propaganda in Greek sources, while David S. Potter's The Roman Empire at Bay, 2004, notes Alexander's regret, sending slaves to quench the fire, too late. Impacts. The fire lasted days, ash fertilizing fields but poisoning wells. Society splintered as survivors fled to Pasargadae. Oral traditions of the night, the stars fell persisting in Pahlavi texts. He destroyed not bodies alone, but the temples of memory, where women passed law. Martyrs? No, the hymn's echo was resistance's spark, but the machine preferred silence, flames devouring scrolls of royal genealogies. The third act scorched the past, but the fourth would chain the present. On the third day, as smoke hung like a pall over the blackened terrace, the fourth act chained the living to the march, the Naqsh Rajab cliffs echoing with Jive's clank, their rock-cut figures of investiture now blind witnesses. Winter relented slightly, a hesitant sun warming the valley, but the wind carried cinders bite, smells of charred flesh from unburied dead, mingling with mule dung from the baggage train. Location. The Grand Staircase, its reliefs of tribute, bearers Ethiopians with giraffes, Indians with peacocks defaced with graffiti in Greek. Alexander is Zeus. Present. Logothetai clerks tallying slaves in wax tablets, soldiers in hybrid garb, Persian tunics over Greek greaves, their faces gaunt from revels. Political pivot. Alexander proclaimed himself king of Asia, minting coins with his profile beside Zeus, while Bessus, Darius's betrayer, crowned himself Artaxerxes V in Bactria. Sensory immersion. Dust gritty underfoot, tastes of hardtack and watered vinegar, sounds of whips cracking, women's bare feet slapping stone worn smooth by processions. Specifics honed on the adult captives, now yoked in coffles of 50. Thalestris, the dancer 20. Her background in Susa's temple troops, family of musicians, tuning lutes for queens, thought of melodies to soothe her swelling belly from the first night. Character built. She'd once danced for Bagoses the eunuch, her anklets chiming like stars. Tension drew out as teams roped them, Zara's mother refusing water, her weaver's hands balling fists. A supply officer, Craterus's man, selected 10 for the engineers' camp, leading them down to wagons laden with looted statues. The procession halted at a way station, tents of goat hair flapping. Silence descended, broken by a jackal's howl. The act elided Arian's harsh treatment on the road to return. She stumbled back at dawn, bruises blooming like nightshade, but taught a child nearby, presence noted, harm undetailed. Focus redirecting to her. A weaving knot, continuity's thread. Artazostra, claimed earlier, marched beside, her sapphire lost, but eyes plotting the Zagros passes. This chaining illuminated the logistics of empire, power as supply chain, women as mobile assets to bind loyalty. Per logistical studies in Donald Engels's Alexander the Great and the logistics of the Macedonian army, 1978. Broader. Echoes Roman verse sacrum, sacred spring offerings of captives. Modern. Refugee columns in Syria 2015. Women assaulted en route, per Amnesty International. Debate. Was it policy or opportunism? Bryant in Alexander the Great and His Empire, 2010, argues systemic, citing Babylonian records of 15,000 deportees from Persepolis region. Impacts. The march to Ecbatana killed hundreds, survivors auctioned in Babylon, Persian silk routes repurposed for Greek trade, but trauma-festered, birthing tales in the Shahnameh of avenging daughters. The system didn't just move bodies, it moved erasure, gyves linking victim to victor in unbreakable alloy. Ghosts marched, but their steps sowed dissent. The fourth act bound the present, but the fifth would steal the future. While the columns snaked eastward, the fifth act stole tomorrow, unfolding in the tent cities along the royal road, under a spring sky heavy with pollen from almond blossoms, the air sweet, yet tainted by camp latrines' rot. Location: a halting station near Pasargadae, Cyrus's tomb a white dome mocking the procession, its gardens overgrown with thistles. Weather warmed, but nights chilled bones, sounds of coyotes scavenging, smells of stewed lentils and unwashed linens, tastes of brackish water from skins. Present: camp followers, Persian defectors in service, Macedonian non-combatants, all under Hephaestion's lax eye, his grief for lost comrades loosening reins. Political: Alexander's proskynesis edict brewing mutiny at Opis later, but here, integration's dark underbelly. Sensory: rope burns on skin, distant sarissa drills, textures of threadbare cloaks against fevered flesh. The core: forced unions, the wedding of captives to veterans. Cispara, the scribe, 22, her Elamite roots in riverine canals, family of scholars debating Herodotus's lies, pondered cuneiform curses. She resisted a sergeant's advance, scratching his face, but was bound to a bedroll in the supply tent. Tension: the camp hushed as stars wheeled. Implication per sources: Plutarch's mingling of blood skipped to aftermath. She rose with dawn, gaze steel, etching a message in dirt for a passing Median. The eagle falls. Melantha danced no more, but hummed for the group, her voice a beacon. Among them, families' young ones noted for context, their herding to nurseries cruel but undetailed, redirect to the mother's resolve. This integration masked colonization, power rewriting lineage, as in Foucault's biopolitics avant la lettre. Patterns: Spanish conquistadors mestizaje in Mexico. Modern: Rohingya rapes in Myanmar, 2017. Ethnic cleansing via violation. Scholarship: Stella Sanford's The Cultural Politics of the Female Body, 2001, analyzes as gender conquest. Impacts: hybrid cultures rose, but at cost suicide rates in harems spiked, per later Sassanid edicts. The machine birthed a new Persia, but ghosts whispered of purity lost. They wanted heirs, not rebels. But in every child, resistance slept. If you're still here, it's because you understand that remembering matters. What comes next is harder the crack in the machine. You can stop any time, but for those continuing, let's see this through together. While Alexander was destroying Persepolis' daughters, he made one crucial error. He forgot the soldiers were men, not gears. The conspiracy brewed not in Persian shadows, but Macedonian ranks. The Opis mutiny of 324 BC, 2,000 miles east, where the machine ground too fine. The conspirators were the somatophylax, royal guards like Leonatus and Peucestas, grizzled from the Hydaspes, their faces lined like maps of the Punjab. Motivations ran deep. Alexander's Persianization, adopting the diadem, kaftan, marrying Statira at Susa, stank of betrayal to men who'd buried brothers at Gaugamela for Hellas avenged. They chafed at proskynesis, bowing to a god-king, and the forced weddings echoed the women's fates, diluting their blood with barbarian seed. Hephaestion's death in Ecbatana, that summer, cracked the facade. Alexander's month-long mourning, shaving his hair, crucifying the doctor, alienated even loyalists. Whispers of he's lost the fire, spreading like fever. The plot unfolded in summer heat. The Euphrates, a muddy vein near Opis's ruins. Tents pitched on baked clay, air shimmering. Alexander summoned 20,000 veterans for discharge, a gift-masking purge of old guard. Tensions snapped. As he spoke of new recruits, Persian youths in Macedonian drill, the phalanx jeered. "Give us the eastern sluts," present tense grips. August, sun beats down. A centurion steps forward, sarissa grounded like a staff. "We followed you to the edge of the world, Basilius. For what? To kiss barbarian asses?" Murmurs swell to roar, fists raised, dust clouding the review ground. Alexander vaults the palisade, dagger drawn, but Ptolemy intervenes, pulling him back as archers knock. The standoff lasts hours, soldiers encamped apart, feasting on looted rice. sharing tales of Persepolis' spoils turned burdens, women who cursed in the night, children with slanted eyes staring accusation. He aimed his cruelty at the wrong men, the army itself. The breaking came swift. Alexander relented, banqueting 9,000, toasting reconcilers, gifting talents, but the wound festered. Deaths followed. Quintus's ghost invoked, plots in Babylon where Alexander perished, poisoned or fevered, June 323 BC, his body seized by Perdiccas amid riots. Chaos erupted. The Somatophylex scattered, Leonatus fallen at Lamia, Pusestas ruling Persis till Antigonus's blade. Power transferred in blood. Siculus to Babylonia, Ptolemy to Egypt, the empire fracturing into Diadochi wars, 40 years of kinslaying. Immediate anarchy. At Troparadisus 320 BC, partitions redrawn, Persian satraps reinstated, the women's children pawned in alliances. This is what happens when the machine breaks. It devours everything victor and vanquished alike. But the system survived. In Lysimachus's Thracian harems, in Antigone's courts, the blueprint etched in Hellenistic dynasties. The mutiny stopped the march, but not the erasure. Ghosts marched on in the successors' veins. The meaning emerges not in texts alone, but in the earth that remembers. Picture June 1933. The Iranian plain baking under a merciless sun. Ernst Herzfeld, German archaeologist, bearded and sun-helmeted, kneeling in the dust of Ku'e Rahmat, his trowel scraping a layer of ash, heart pounding as if unearthing a god's bone. He'd come from the Oriental Institute, funded by Rockefeller, chasing Achaemenid ghosts since 1905. But this dig, with team of Persian laborers chanting folk songs, uncovered the 100-column hall's floor, tiles fused by heat exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius, datable by thermoluminescence to 330 BC. What they found, a woman's gold earring, twisted in flight, inscribed with Elamite script, Anahita, protects beside a Macedonian arrowhead, corroded bronze whispering of the sack. Scientific rigor followed. Carbon-14 on charred cedar beams confirmed the date. Stratigraphy showing a clean burn layer over Darius's treasury seals, proving deliberate fire, not accident. Herzfeld felt the weight of bridge from Strabo's tails to soil. The earring's owner perhaps Melantha, her prayer metallized. Why it matters slices modern. This discovery, published in Archaeological History of Iran, 1938, reframed Alexander not as liberator, but arsonist, fueling decolonization narratives in 1950 seconds. Iran, under Mossadegh, who invoked Persepolis as national soul, teaches powers amnesia how victors' scrolls bury victims until digs democratize history. Parallels sting. Taliban shattering Palmyra 2015, or Russia's shelling of Mariupol Theatre 2022, cultural erasure as war crime per ICC. Psychologically, its traumas echo. Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, 2014, explains how survivors' descendants carry cellular memory, Persian Iranians today tracing resilience to those women. Remembering matters because its refusal. The empire lasted 200 years post Alexander, but couldn't erase the earring's gleam. It's not about gods. It's about what power does when it tries to erase people, and what happens when the earth refuses to forget. They didn't live to see Sassanid revival, but they left mark scratches on bone, songs in wind, redefined victory, not swords, but survival's quiet etch. The machine broke, but the memory endures. A testament that erasure fails when witnesses dig deep. Those women were meant to disappear. That was the plan. The fire, the chains, the march into oblivion, their names unscribed, their faces veils in the dust. But they didn't disappear. They're still here. In the gold earring twisted under Herzfeld's brush, its inscription flaring under lab lights, in the ash layers that refuse to scatter, holding the heat of their flight. In the Babylonian clay tablets, smuggled from Nippur in 1,880 seconds digs, listing Persepolis deportees, 8,240 women, valued at 3 derricks each, their worth reduced but existence etched. And now they're here with you. Because you chose to listen. Because you chose to remember. Because you refused to let their silence be the final word. Anahita as parvares mikonad. Anahita protects. That's what the earring said, in a script older than Alexander's dreams. A prayer from a woman who, in her last moment, clutched divinity closer than fear. You're not just a reader, you're a witness. And witnesses are how the past stays alive, how the machine's grind is halted not by heroes, but by those who pause, who dig, who say, "This happened, and it mattered." Being a witness means carrying the weight, the earrings cool gold in your palm, the smoke's bite in your throat, but also the light. The way Melantha's hymn outlasted the Sarissa, Artazostra's sapphire gaze piercing 2 millennia to ask, "What will you build from my ruin?" These stories matter because they connect yesterday's pyre to today's headlines. Every refugee column, every silent testimony in a courtroom, echoes Persepolis. We owe the past not pity, but action-funding archives, like the Persepolis Fortification Tablets Project, amplifying Iranian scholars like Helene Sancizi-Weerdenberg, who debunked Alexander's myths in the 1982 Groningen conferences. We owe them conversations that turn horror to caution, empathy to policy, ensuring no woman's body becomes a battlefield again. Owe them the refusal to scroll past, to let algorithms bury bones. If this story moved you, if it reminded you why remembering matters, leave a comment below. Tell me what struck you. The earrings whisper, the mutiny's roar, the system's cold math. Share what you're thinking. Ask your questions, what of Roxana's fate, or the Diodorus' daughters? Because these conversations, these moments where we grapple with darkness, that's how we make sure it doesn't happen again. These threads weave the memorial they were denied. If you believe voices like theirs deserve to be heard, subscribe. Not for me, but for every silence that still needs to be broken. For every story still buried under ash and agenda. For every voice that was meant to disappear but refuses to stay gone. Alexander ruled for 13 years, built a system that showed every future conqueror how to unmake a people with fire, chain, and claim. And the blueprint never disappeared. But neither did their resistance, the hymn in the smoke, the scratch on the clay. Anahita, as parvaris mikunad. Anahita protects.